Hey pals, welcome to this edition of Abbey Research Reads. I'm Dr. Kristen, and today's book that we're discussing is Siren Queen. I really can't articulate the title of this book. Siren Queen by Nghi, which was recommended to me, I believe, on NPR, but it's on some list about what to read for Asian American Pacific Islanders Heritage Month. And in typical me fashion, I ordered about 15 of them from the library and then ran out of time to read most of them. But I did get a chance to read through this one. Now, I should say it wasn't for me. I'd still give this book an A. Let me explain. I am not a magical realism person, and there are quite a few magical realism elements in here. To me, magical realism is stressful because it's like I don't know the rules of the world. I don't know what's a metaphor. I don't know what's not. And for some people, that's enticing and wonderful, and they get really into it. And for me, it's just stressful and not a pleasant reading experience. So it wasn't a book for me. Because of the magical realism, it was a bit of a slog. However, anyone who enjoys or is open to magical realism, this is a stunner of a book. It takes place kind of at the cusp, like Hollywood is, the talkies have happened, but the system still hasn't broken down, where like you get hired by a studio and you're contracted to that studio and guaranteed pay with that studio. And our heroine's name is Luli Y. Or Wei. I'm not entirely sure. I've heard it said both ways on things. She's a Chinese American in pre-code Hollywood. And there's a lot in this book about, just like the casual systemic racism. There's one statement about like she wasn't allowed in the library because even though they had allowed blacks into the library, this is her quote, like they'd allowed black folks into the library, they hadn't decided if Asians were okay yet, so she had to wait for a librarian who believed she was white to be allowed into the library. These are like the small, everyday ways that we don't talk enough about historically systemic racism. A lot about the abuses of Hollywood, of women and other minorities, a lot about what it felt like to be kind of reduced to your body in a certain way. She got started by just showing up on movie sets and kind of, making it work, as it were. But it was a painful existence. And there's lots of questions in here about what is personhood and what is truth and what is joy and what is all of those other things. Like I said, I am sure I missed out on some of the deeper themes of this book because the magical realism took me out of it so often. There's talks about monsters and dragons, and these are like actual monsters. There's some mixing I've read in some other reviews with Chinese mythology. I am not well versed in Chinese mythology, so I didn't pick up on any of that, but it certainly didn't take me out of the story. The elements that did, again, were when you're talking about monsters that are also humans, do they turn into actual, like, monsters with fangs and fur and whatever, or are we just talking about humans like Harvey Weinstein with monstrous behavior? I just get pulled out. Again, that's not her fault. And for you, if you're watching this and thinking like, oh, I could really dig a 1930s magical realism book, dude, get this. It's a quick read, but immersive. The prose is beautiful. I've never read anything else by this author, but I'll be looking her up and keeping her in mind. In terms of empathy reads, I think it can be a really important one, again, if it's for you, because that lived in element of like, this is what we talk about historical America, and we think about idealized versions of, the family or June Cleaver or anything else. Like, this is also historical America. And Hollywood was built on a unequal system and will remain an unequal system. Like, you can't patchwork oppressive systems to make just systems. So there's inherent evils in terms of abuses of power and people that Hollywood contains, and kind of seeing some of the germinating factors of that is really helpful. I'm on a particular kick right now to look back at some of the foundations of Hollywood and how systems were set up so I can understand a little bit more of how things work now from a cultural perspective. But yeah, overall, a satisfying read for sure, just not for me. But that doesn't mean a thing. I talk about empathy a lot on this channel. Dr. Aaron and I will show up at least every week, if not more frequently sometimes, to talk about empathy reads. How cracking open a book, be it fiction or nonfiction, young adult, adult, romance, horror, thriller can help us understand humanity just a little bit better. Siren Queen is a great example of one of the books that can do that. If you liked this content, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you like the kind of bigger conversations about how to understand humanity better, hop on over to our sister channel, which is the main channel, Abbey Research, where Dr. Aaron and I are all the time talking about things like empathy and inclusivity. If you want to make sure that you don't miss a single thing, the link to our newsletter is in the downstairs, and we'd love to have you join us there as well. Until next time, happy reading.